A very good evening. A warm welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine, presented by Pick and Pay. Welcome to the Dan Really Likes Wine cellar, and welcome to an evening that has got two particularly special guests for two particular reasons. One of my guests is a bit of an old school maverick of the world of wine, someone who's been on the show before, and somebody who is spoken of in the most venerated of terms by those who know their wine. He's been part of the South African winemaking fabric for many years, but he's continuing to roll out some quite extraordinary wine. We're going to drink some of that a little later on this evening. And the other is somebody whose estate I got to have my wedding at 10 years ago this month. It's an estate that's had some changes of late and some exciting changes, but one that changes or not is still also making some lovely wine. So great people, great wine on the show. So let me welcome my two guests. One of them is the man who Greg Sherwood actually has a photo of as his screensaver on his cell phone ahead of his wife and kids. That is the esteem in which he holds Ian Naude. And the other is the man behind Backsberg, Simon Back. Guys, welcome. Lovely to have you both on the show, and a warm welcome. And good memories of times with both of you in different spaces. And Simon, there's a lot of wedding collection, some of it slightly blurred to look back on. And we're going to talk about Backsberg and good times, of which you and I both had many. But let me kick off with Mr. Naude, and it's a warm welcome to you, having you back on the show. Just give us a little bit of an introduction, because there might be people who've missed your last appearance on the show. The 3-minute biography, in as much as you can, of somebody who spent a few years, without suggesting you're anywhere near middle age, but a few years making wine and being such an important part of our winemaking community, Ian.
Yeah. Thanks, Dan. I don't know how you'd put, I don't know how many years in 3 minutes. I was lucky enough to be born and raised here in Durbanville area, and went to study at Elsenburg, and then after Elsenburg, I thought there must be more to life than sitting here, because I started traveling and making wine, that's a loose term. Being a cellar rat in many countries, America, France, Italy, Germany. And as I just said to Simon, his phenomenal grandfather, Sydney, asked me to go and help family of theirs in Israel. And I even did a harvest in Israel, and then came back and knew this is where I wanted to be. And a few of us who traveled knew we want to put South Africa where it belongs. But it was quite difficult at that stage, because we did everything that everybody else did. And your Tesco's and Sainsbury's came in and said, listen, make us a Sauvignon Blanc that tastes like New Zealand. Just for rugby's sake, I would not do that. And then suddenly we thought, what was South Africa? And we thought, blending of terroirs would be the thing. And 30 years later, I see in London and places how good South Africa is doing, and you were part of this phenomenal journey in this beautiful country.
We're going to be talking about some of the new wine that you've got in just a moment, but I love talking to you about the older stuff, because you've got such a fervent belief, not just in the quality of a wine, but also the potential it has to age, especially the white wine. If we talk about aging of the industry as a whole, though, go back to when you started. We don't need to put a particular year on it, but go back to when you started, and then have a look at the wine world we see in 2021. Can you pick one or two, three or four major things for you that have changed quite dramatically in the South African wine landscape?
Firstly, it was, we always joke, even Sadi and myself, we sit down and we think back, and we actually want to do a tasting for a charity, hopefully beginning next year. We're going to talk about our journey of winemaking, where we were one of the first guys who wanted to work overseas and as cellar rats, and then came back and made money, and then went back to Europe again, or any other country. And then you would come back and you got a job at a co-op again. And then what was really good is you started realizing that places like France, Italy, Spain has got these 3,000-4,000 years of experience. And then you want to try the cellar master, to convince the cellar master at that co-op that, you know what, you're actually doing is not the correct way. And then usually the answers was, after you've cleaned the tanks and the floors, you're fired. So we were fired from quite a few jobs because we thought, and that's what made us quite interested in this can't carry on like this. And we sat down and we thought, what is South Africa? And we thought, as I said, blending of terroirs. But the first thing was, there was three things that I was very passionate about. The one was white blends, because nobody else can do white blends like we do in South Africa, because we can blend terroirs together, even if it's the same cultivar. My example is always, if you buy 5 or 10 vines, the same cultivar, say Sauvignon Blanc from Wellington, and you plant one in Durbanville, Stellenbosch, Malmesbury, Elim, Constantia, 5 years later, that same vine is going to give you something different, and that's the beauty of South Africa. And I thought, second thing we wanted to do was to show people that wines can age. That was not a good idea at that stage, because people thought if wines was 2 years old, it's dead. And the third thing is, we wanted to make food-driven wines, wines that complements food, and that people in the world could sit down and say, wow, this is like a Chablis or a Sancerre or a Burgundy or a Bordeaux. It's this quality. And then that took us a couple of years, and it started working in the UK especially. People started appreciating and then came back. Two other big things that I really enjoyed is I'm working a lot with the younger winemakers, and it's incredible. I'm lucky. I'm traveling to the UK next week again to see all the people there. And they always ask me, South Africa is on a high with wines in the UK. When is this bubble going to burst? And my answer always is, it's not. We're only starting. There's a group of young winemakers that coming in that is fearless. They understand terroir, they understand site-specific wines, they understand quality, that we never had that chances. And the third thing, I think South Africa, old vines has changed the big thing. Jancis Robertson said about 3 years ago, she said, South Africa have to decide now, are they the oldest New World country or the newest Old World country? And I think that was brilliant, because we were always, if you made a wine, people would have said, oh, this is a really good wine. It reminds me of a typical French Chenin Blanc or a typical Aussie style Shiraz. And now suddenly with old vines, we got that depth of quality that not a lot of countries has. Because I mean, if you go to places like France, vineyards would be a mix of ages, where they replanted, so they can't really say this vineyard is 50 years old or 60 years old. And I think in South Africa, we were also the first people who started this old vine project, and I think it's just giving us incredible excitement, number one. Secondly, showing that we know what we're doing. And I think people like your typical French people, because we've got areas here, I mean, Shiraz that you could take to blind tastings in London, and people would say, I never thought this would come from South Africa. And that's the joy I have as a winemaker, because it's like, yes, we can do so much more than what you thought because of all these terroirs. And this, as I said, this young group is taking us to a new level. And I'm kind of glad I'm on the other side of the industry where I can look at it, because I don't know if I can compete with these guys.
I think you can comfortably, Ian, and I love your use of the term fearless about our new winemakers, because it really does sum them up so well, and not in a gung-ho, not in a carefree kind of way, but in a nothing's going to stop us. And I think I know where some of that comes from, because I've met somebody who reminds me a bit of that. But we'll come back to you in a moment. Ian, we've got a number of your fans. Daryl Balfour's watching. Good evening, Dan, wow. Simon, and Pierre Ian. Daryl was a great supporter of the show. Lovely to have you on. And then Lisa Harlow. Sorry, I'm a bit late. See you next week, Ian. Lisa, you're in for a treat.
Yeah. Lisa, I can't wait to meet you.
Neither can I. Come to South Africa. Hurry up about it, Lisa. You need to get back here. All right. So Ian is one of our guests this evening, and I'm going to come back. There's so many points you raised there, Ian, that I want to pick up on. But let's head over to another piece of wine history, and that is an estate called Backsberg, and it's one that I am as fond of as any for very personal reasons. My wedding there 10 years ago. We'll get to the wedding and my mother behaving deplorably probably, and breaking her ankle while trying to Greek dance on top of a table. We'll also get to the new developments, which are so exciting, Simon. Let's start off with, first of all, welcoming you to the show, and thank you so much for being part of it. But also just telling us a little bit about Backsberg. I can see sitting up in my cellar, I've got the 2016 collection, the 100-year anniversary of Backsberg. So there's a good dose of history. Give us the potted version thereof, the Backsberg narrative, start through to 105 years later in a flash of wine history.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Great to be here. So, yeah, my family sort of harks from Eastern Europe. My family's Jewish. I said to Ian before the show started, we're probably not the best examples of Judaism that you can find, but nevertheless, yeah, they essentially fled Europe in the early 1900s and arrived in Cape Town essentially with the clothes on their back and a suitcase. And yeah, super humble beginnings in working in Cape Town. You know, my great grandfather was essentially a laborer on the docks in what was then the sort of area around the waterfront. He then got a job in Adderley Street as a butchery sort of delivery boy. He then found his way to Paarl, where he eventually owned a butchery. And then the story goes that someone came into the butchery one day and said, "Hey, do you want to buy this piece of dirt on the Simonsberg?" And he said, "Well, that sounds like an idea." He had no background in winemaking or viticulture, but he essentially sold his butchery and in 1916 bought what's today the Backsberg property here at Kleinbubble and Storen. And yeah, like I said, very humble beginnings, but slowly, I mean, he saw there was a history of winemaking and growing grapes in this area, and he got stuck into that. And it was really, I guess, my grandfather who took the reins of the business and essentially developed the name Backsberg and the idea of producing fine wine. He was really kind of one of the doyens of the more modern South African wine history. And yeah, then I guess my dad joined in 1976, and he was the first member in our family who actually went to university, and he studied, winemaking and viticulture. So he kind of brought like a wealth of technical sort of knowledge to the farm. And he's also been kind of a big driver on some of the environmental initiatives that we've got going. And then, yeah, I joined the farm in 2008, 2009. And yeah, just tried to not mess it up, tried to really build on what my great grandfather, and father have done. And, now, we're shipping to some 35 countries around the world, got a very strong sort of local market. And then, yeah, as you alluded to, have now recently done a deal with DGB, which is very exciting.
There we go. Tell us a little bit more about that deal, Simon. DGB is, I think, in quite an exciting space. Boschendal is a very healthy old road wine, is winning a number of awards, and they seem to be very progressive on the wine front. You guys, on the other hand, very much a family business, lots of history, quite concentrated. So initially, big conglomerate, small family business. But when I look at it more closely in the shared love of wine, it seems to be a more natural fit. So tell us a little bit about how Backsberg and DGB have come together and where that path leads you.
Yeah, I mean, we did a sale last year of our main property. We've got a few farms on this Klapmitz-Simondium strip, but we sold our main property. And in discussions, we've got quite a big brandy stock holding. And my father and Tim Hutchinson, the executive chairman of DGB, got chatting, and we started talking about the brandy. And then, yeah, one thing led to another, and DGB themselves are kind of on a growth path and looking to develop their sort of premium wine offering. And yeah, it just seemed like a really great fit. There was like a synergy. There was really great people on the DGB team, and we just felt as a family business, that this was like a very interesting, next step, and to develop the whole market. I mean, DGB have got just a fantastic route to market. I mean, they've got essentially sort of offices in all the major markets, and just an incredible export team, and fantastic winemakers as well. I mean, Tim is also a whiz on the branding and marketing front, and there was also just a real kind of alignment on values and the vision on where the wines could go. And we just thought, okay, this is actually a way to fuel the kind of next stage or next chapter of Backsberg. And essentially they bought a majority stake in the brand and the business and the stock. And now we're developing a winery in Franschhoek, and I'm staying on as a kind of director of a new entity that we've formed together, and just excited to really support the next stage of the journey. And as I said, the fantastic people in the DGB team, and I'm excited to work with them.
Day to day, Simon, does it change the nature of the wine, what you're making, how you're producing it?
No, so I mean, Alicia Rechner, our winemaker, is staying on as part of the kind of next stage. So she's essentially, formed part of the DGB team. Our marketing manager has stayed on. Our export manager has stayed on. Some of our staff have joined as well. Other staff have joined as well. So we've really tried to ensure that the kind of core team remains unchanged. But now, we have some of the firepower of DGB behind us. So I think, the idea is to keep to the consistency, keep to the quality that we've always tried to sort of put out, and just develop from here.
It makes for a formidable combination and an exciting future. Solomon Monyamani is watching. Hello, Ian, says Solomon. Good to have you watching. And Reginald Peckler from up at Cheetah Plains in the Sabi Sands. I love everything that is old vines, old manners, old wines. This sounds like Opa Willem. Ian, thank you for bottling the poetry. Your wines have it all: classy style and fabulous character. Much like Ian himself, who has a bit of a link to Simon and to the Back family. We mentioned Simon's grandfather there, Ian. You knew him. In fact, you got dragged into a madcap wine operation in Israel, didn't you?
I did. You know what? I never thought, because I didn't know Simon was going to be on tonight. And I honestly want to say this: one of the biggest influence I ever had, and still till today, was Sidney Beck. Sidney was one of those guys, and I had huge respect for this guy. He would go around to wineries and he would meet young people where you worked. And he would sit down with you, and when Sydney came in, you were like in awe. Sydney came to visit me. And then he would start asking you really good questions. Where are you heading? What is your passion? What do you want to do in life with wine? What is your vision? And nobody ever asked that. And it was a big thing because we connected. And then he came back a while later, and he said to me, I'm going to ask you a favor. And I remember very clearly, I said to him, Sydney, anything you ask, I'll do. Well, I didn't think it was going to be
dangerous.
Yeah, very, very dangerous. But I trusted Sydney with my life. And then literally, when you were that age, traveling was not a big thing then. I only started traveling, and Sydney said, we're going to buy you a free ticket to Israel. And I've got Jewish friends there that I really think you should go and help at the winery. My first answer was, if Sydney believes in me, I'll do it. Yes, until I got there. And that was quite a big experience for me. And but still, back to Sydney, it was, I still sometimes make wine, and I think I wish Sydney could have tasted this. And he left such a legacy with a lot of younger winemakers at that stage. And I always feel, when I work with a younger group as well, people would ask me, why are you doing that? And why are you wasting your time? And I thought, Sydney wasted a lot of time on me, and it's my turn now to pass on that baton. And Simon, you had incredible grandfather. And it's a privilege to be with you on tonight. I didn't know we were, but I would love to sit with you and your dad, and there's more Israel stories I would like to share with you, but off camera.
Yeah, I was gonna say maybe the ones that you can't share on the show here. But I mean,
Yes.
for me, it's incredible. Always, the how frequently I bump into people that, have a story about my grandfather and my father. So it's, to feel like we, have sort of paid it forward for the industry and influenced, young people to be excited about wine and to explore the wine industry. Like that gives me a really warm feeling, and yeah, I'm just super proud of the history that we have. And I'm glad, even though we trekked you to Israel into the desert, I'm glad it was an experience.
You know what was
Brilliant.
the
I think
biggest fun thing? Sorry, Dan,
carry
please.
on then.
No, it was really interesting. Sydney came to visit me during harvest, and we had hours of time because I was not religious and I wasn't kosher. I wasn't, yeah, I could go on with the list, but I had a rabbi that I worked with, and he was the only one who spoke English, and nobody else in the winery could really speak English. And then Sydney came to visit me in Israel, and that was my highlight of that whole time. And I thought, okay, I can relax now because I've got an interpreter. I can talk to him and he can explain to the workers. And I remember it so clearly. We were sitting outside under the vines and all the tanks was in the sun, and I can carry on about 100 really bad things. And I said, and the workers started asking me questions in Hebrew, because we had sentences that I could understand. And he would ask me, what are they saying? And it's like, Sydney, they were saying this, and I couldn't understand why doesn't Sydney understand this. And he said, I can hardly speak Hebrew, but it's great to have you here. Now I also know what's going on. And I would never, never, never forget that. I thought he was going to be my interpreter. Yeah.
One of the many reasons I love having Ian on the show. You never know what stories you're going to get. You do know they are going to be fabulous. As you know, the wines are going to be fabulous, Ian, and you've alluded to already your love of the older wines. And I see Daryl Balfour saying that he has the Naude 2010 white blend in his glass tonight. Probably my most favorite white wine in my cellar. Who says white wine, South African white wine, can't age another 10 to 20 years, Ian? Well, it's not out of the question, because you seem to have found an alchemy to South African white wine. It's a particular grapes. Maybe it's particular terroir. Maybe it's the regions you've got. But I suspect it's also just your knowledge and that magic touch you seem to have. You've got something with white wine in particular, Ian, which allows you to not just make white wine that gets people so excited and which clearly delivers on what you're looking to do, but you've got white wine which, as Daryl says, 10, 11 years on, it's still looking at you saying, what's the rush? We're not going anywhere anytime soon. What is the secret to what you've been able to do with South African white wine here?
You know, then a lot of people always ask me that, and I wish I was one of those people that was very clever and could say all these big things, but I would be lying. I always say to the young winemakers as well, the moment you start respecting a vineyard and you start respecting your job and you start respecting the product and you take your ego away and all the egos around you, I always say when wine is 50 years or 60, the vineyard is 50 or 60 years old, and it survived drought and wind and horrible people and tractors and wind and snow and 45 degrees. If it's still there after 50 or 60 or 70 years, it's got its own story to tell. The only thing you need to do is to respect that vineyard and to understand that vineyard and to go there and to see how it grows, how it develops, how it shows you its story. And I always say on a Greek island, it changed my life. There was a little small winery, and it was written in Greek and then in English. And it said, terroir is to take a liquid photograph of a specific ecosystem and to put that in a bottle. That's your job as a winemaker, not to try and outdo something or try to do as a trend. You have to understand that vineyard and try to take that liquid photograph and carry that into the bottle without manipulation. And the biggest thing for me is the date to pick. I always say to the young people that you've got a 3-day window for perfect ripeness. And that doesn't mean the ripeness that you think it should be, or it should be 23 bulling and then 7 point something acidity, and the pH should be that. No, forget about those things. You can read about that later when you do a wine presentation. The moment you go into the vineyard and you taste and you taste and you taste the grapes, and you find where that it almost blossoms, where that vineyard gives you that perfect grape, that's the day you pick. Not, okay, but I'm busy this weekend, we'll do it on Tuesday and I can't find that somebody can come pick that day. And when you do that, you capture that essence of that vineyard and you put it in the bottle. And it's just beauty. And then you sit back and you let the wine do the work, the natural fermentation, the acidity that comes out. And then wine develops because it gives you that perfect date where it said, I'm ready. And you can't do that by doing it every year. Okay, we roughly pick this between the 25th and the 30th of March. No, you can't do that because weather changes every year, and then it's a drought, and then we have rain, and then we have wind, and we have all these things. Go to the vineyard and taste the grapes, and taste the grapes, and taste the grapes, and that grape will tell you, the vine will tell you, I'm ready. And for me, that was the biggest secret, is not, this is how we're going to do it. It's just respecting that and trying to take that liquid photograph. And when you do that, wine ages beautiful. And then I always say that beautiful story of that vineyard standing there for 50 years comes to life. It shows you his journey for 50 years and not your journey. And I always say, and that really pisses me off, is when you stand there with a bottle and it's just medals and little stickers and all those horrible things. No, I'm the last guy in the row. I'm the guy sitting in the winery, in an air conditioning winery, where other people have to pick at 40 degrees Celsius. And a farmer had to work that grapes during the year. And that's why I only put a sticker on my bottles, where it's the old vine, that one, because I feel if you've got that old vine sticker on there, it takes away the pressure and the oh, it's that winemaker and he's done that, but yes, he had an attitude and I never liked his wines. This Naude Langpad is in 1983. I love people to read that and then start talking about the 1983 vineyard and not what I should have done or not done, or they've never liked the wines or they love the wines, but literally take you back to where everything started in the vineyards. And as I said, my last sentence on that is, if you treat vineyards with respect, they will age and they will show you the best.
I couldn't have given you Ian's answer exactly ahead of time, but I could have told you one thing very accurately, and he delivered duly, and that's that he took as little credit as he possibly could himself for executing these wines brilliantly. But there's a very simple reason, Ian, that you don't put stickers on your wine. You'd have to have them in at least a Balthazar to get all of them on if you did. So it just makes life easier to go with the old vine sticker, which you have there. An old vine wine that we're going to try in just a moment, but let's nip back down the road and head back to Backsberg and to Simon. Many memories I have of Backsberg, Simon, of Sunday lunches with the lamb on the spit and music playing as the gentle breeze swept through what's such a lovely place. Also think of going out into the vineyards of Clive Trent and finding out where different grapes called home and drinking wine from the very block that wine was produced. But top of the list has to be a night 10 years ago when I was lucky enough to get married. And this month, Dimitra and I celebrate a decade, and she's a very long-suffering woman. So that's, well, there we go. That's my producer Mias. Not sure where he found that, but yep, that is us in your cellar, and a very special moment it was. That for me is the defining memory. It's a tough question for you, but give me a few of them. What are the memories for you, Simon, as you look back over your time at Backsberg as part of the family that really stand out? The ones that you cherish in particular.
Yeah, I mean, geez, there's so many, but I think my father involved. I've got a sister as well, Jenny. Like involved us in the business from like a very young age, and we kind of grew up. Whether it was in the cellar or at the back of a bucky, or taking out wine to customers. I mean, and I think one of my earliest memories is, and we must have been 5 or 6 years old, and I think my grandfather actually and he was no stranger of hard work, but I think he actually took action with my father. But 5 or 6 years old, and we were packing orders and taking it out to customers in the parking lot, and my sister and I absolutely loved that. And we just saw the joy in which people sort of like, you saw this little kid, could barely like pick up the box, like taking it to your car. And, that was like the earliest stages of like almost that experience around wine, and the joy of that, you brought when you bought wine and deliver it to someone. So like that early like childhood, helping out in the tasting room, early childhood, like taking grape samples with my father, and on a Sunday afternoon, squeezing that out by hand and by feet, to see like where was the sugar level, to Ian's point, you've got like a very specific window on when to pick, and really like understanding that more, and that point of optimum kind of ripeness. So those early memories. And then, yeah, I mean, some of the things that I did over the years is we developed a inter-varsity wine tasting competition called Vino Varsity, and it ran for like 10 years or so. And I hope with COVID it's taken a little break, but to sort of inspire like passion for wine amongst students. I think Stellenbosch sometimes wipe the floor a little bit with UCT, unfortunately, but to really see students get excited about wine, tasting wine, the knowledge around wine was amazing for me. And then some of the events that we were involved in over the years, whether it was the Cape Town Jazz Festival, we were a sponsor of that for many years. Whether it was here on the farm, we did a picnic concert series where we got to support some amazing musicians over the years. So finding places for people to really marry wine and an experience was really like some of the things that I've enjoyed the most.
There's also been quite a sense of adventure to pretty much everything that's happened at Backsberg from the very start, and the adventure that kick-started it, through to your approach to wine and what you make. This kosher range, which pays tribute to your Jewish heritage. There are wines that pop up from not every single grape, but it's not far off. And there's always been a sense I get that you've been looking to push boundaries. And I look in particular at the work that you've done in being an environmentally aware estate. And it's the kind of thing we bandy about around a lot, and most people can find something that applies to that. But you guys, from carbon neutrality to looking at how you really take care of your terroir, it's been fundamental to the philosophy of Backsberg.
Yeah, I mean, on the wine front, I think sometimes we can be accused of having short attention spans. We have played around with a lot of different things. Some of it has stuck, some of it hasn't. In a certain part in the mid 2000s, my dad had I think he was spending too much time in his office, and wanted to get out a bit more. So we ended up purchasing a small property in Priorat in Spain, and then he got exposed to a bunch of different grapes there, and then we tried to play with them a bit here on the farm. So yeah, definitely on the grape front, we've tried a number of things, and that's been exciting. And yeah, on the environmental side, that kind of journey started, I guess sort of the mid 2000s. I mean, for as long as I know my father, he's never been one to kind of waste resources. And I guess early 2000s, I think the Al Gore film came out, and the topic of climate change, sort of, excuse the pun, started hotting up a little bit. And we kind of felt as a family, as a business, we've enjoyed the fruits of the land, so to speak, for decades essentially, but not always kind of returned the favor. If there was a piece of fynbos or a tree in the way of where we wanted to plant a vineyard, it would get the kind of bulldozer treatment, and would always sort of come off second best. And we just felt we couldn't operate like that anymore. And we started looking around at ways, environmentally sensitive farming techniques. And, there's a lot of different sort of philosophies and thoughts out there, whether it's organic or biodynamic. And one of the things that resonated with us was kind of looking at the world through the lens of carbon emissions. And, that sort of felt like a kind of umbrella view of the farming operation, the winery, and the sales and marketing efforts, distribution. And yeah, we set about essentially becoming carbon neutral. And that was through a combination of, big tree planting program, and then, actually taking measures to reduce our fuel usage, reduce our electricity usage, change the packaging. I mean, that's one of the more, controversial things. We put a lot of wines, and this was way back already, like in lightweight bottles. We use recycled materials in the cartons, and really tried to kind of change the way we operated. And it was always sort of my dad at the forefront of that, and me kind of on the marketing front, playing catch up to his innovation and stuff. And that's sort of ethic of innovating, trying new things, pushing boundaries has really always been core to what we've tried to do. And we've never been afraid of failure. Sometimes, like I said, it's come off, sometimes it hasn't. But I think that's the fun and excitement of it is when you're pushing boundaries, it's a very interesting place to play. And and I mean, I think one of the exciting things for us is that DGB also have done a lot of great work on the sustainability front, and that sort of spoke to us as well. Like, there's a real commitment there, not just this kind of greenwashing story of saying you're doing all these things, and meanwhile in the background it's not happening. So that's an important part of the partnership for us, is continuing that work going forwards.
I think you've got it right a lot more than you've got it wrong, and we benefited from the touch of mad scientists to the collective effort over the years, which has been a lot of fun. And the wine has always been a favourite of mine. And we're going to try some in a moment. I've got some 2011 Pump House Shiraz in celebration of the year in which Mrs. Nichols' life changed for the better. But we've also got some whites to try. So let me nip back to Mr. Naude. Preempted by a couple of comments here. Lisa Harlow saying, Ian makes my favourite South African wines. Who knew Colombard could taste like that? We're going to try that Colombard in just a moment. Helen Leben-Buerter saying, love your wines, Ian. And Daryl Balfour, Ian was without doubt the most humble winemaker I've ever met, and probably one of the very best. And I too hate stickers and medals on bottles. Or let me stick up a little for the medals and for these stickers. I do think they play an important role. A lot of people who judge those wines are important members of our wine community. But there are some bottles that look a little like Christmas trees, and there is the definite potential to overdo it. But let's steer away from that. Let's look simply at the wine and our own enjoyment of it. And a couple of whites to try. And first of all, the Old Vine Chenin Blanc. This is it, the 2010. Which I almost feel slightly guilty here, Ian, because as important as it is to try new vintages and to get a feel for them, it's much like drinking a Sardi. You shouldn't be drinking it in the first decade. You feel like you're doing something wrong, and Ian's going to shout at me and unfriend me on Facebook. So I'm doing this under duress, simply to see where it might be going. Tell me a bit about this Chenin Blanc, Ian.
Dan, for me, that was again Chenin Blanc. I've been passionate about Chenin Blanc for many years, and I thought if there's one grape variety in South Africa that we can really showcase the world. Um, and what I love about this is people would ask me, and I love that question, when people say, what would be your top Chenin Blancs name your top 5 Chenin Blancs in South Africa? And it's like, no, I can't do that. I can give you in one region my top 10, and then in the next region my top 10. And I think if we go back to what we thought in the beginning, terroirs is our biggest thing in South Africa, because terroir showcases, I mean, a Chenin Blanc from Durbanville, Agterparel, Malmesbury, Elam, Elgin, Durbanville. It's completely different wines. And even if you just say, if I take Stellenbosch, if you take just different regions in Stellenbosch, you're going to get 20 spectacular world-class Chenin Blancs, and then a lot of them very drinkable. And I think Chenin Blanc for me was always that thing, that showcases where we say, this is South Africa. This is our terroir. This is not the boring thing that you're going to get year in and year out and year after that. It's just so many to experiment with, and we've got these old vines in Chenin Blanc that I love. And Madeleine, Master of Wine from Sweden, said the other day, because I'm jumping around with Chenin Blancs. I've never made a Chenin Blanc old vine 2 years in a row, because I feel life is too short for that. I want to, every year I get excited and I get Rosa Creer phoning me and say, I found a new block of Chenin Blanc for you, or a new block of this. And it's like, I'm there, I'm going to make this. It's rather the diversity that I love, where you could put my Chenin Blancs in a row and in vertical tasting, and I could show you, this is South Africa. It's not about me. This one comes from Swartland. This one is a blend from 3 different terroirs. This one, and the 2020 that you're tasting right now. I wish I could have released that only in 5 or 6 years, but unfortunately I work for myself, so cash flow is a little bit of a problem. And I have to sell these wines, but I hope that people would keep them for many years. And people always ask me, how long will this wine age? And I said 20, 30 years plus. These wines are only getting better when you decant them and you drink them over 2-3 days, and you see when they've got a little bit of oxygen, how they just give you this incredible fruit and depth in the old vines. And the 2020 is from 2 different vineyards. And I usually try in the old vines mostly to keep that one vineyard, but then I sometimes have 2 or 3 vineyards that I fermented separate, and I think the diversity is going to be even better if I put 2 or 3 of these vineyards together. For me also, I ferment them and I put them in old oak barrels. Old oak barrels, because I got 4 new ones. But I don't want the wood to overpower. I want that salinity, that beautiful fruit that you get from a South African Chenin Blanc to be in the forefront, and then all the layers underneath that. And for me, Chenin Blanc is one of South Africa's biggest exports. And I think we're just going to go from strength to strength, because I'm finding new vineyards that I didn't even know that they existed. I think that's enough on Chenin Blanc.
I've just been frantically messaging Derek Kilpin at Great Domains to ask him if it's possible to use a Coravin to get the wine out of my glass and back into the bottle, so I can keep the rest of what I years time, which is clearly what I'm supposed to be doing. Shannon's got a great story. Shannon, we understand. Shannon, we know, is this fabulous grape that's doing amazing things and is so great for South Africa. But then Colombard, Ian Naude. Nobody drinks Colombard. Your grandmother drinks Colombard and then has a glass of sherry. Colombard is not cool, Ian Naude. What are you doing making Colombard?
I think it's got something to do with COVID. Last year, I always say to people, I don't know. I get the foster horrible cousin that nobody else wants to work with comes to me. There must be a connection. I did the same with Cinso. I mean, I never wanted to make Cinso, and then Rosa and myself and misunderstood each other, and I bought the bottle of Cinso, and she phoned me and said, "What are you going to do with the Cinso?" My defense is, it was in winter, it was pruned. I thought it was Cabernet. She said never, it was Cabernet, but that's to be discussed. But I'm really happy about that. And then about 3 years ago, I went up to Vredendal for the first time. I've never been there, and I started talking to the people. I said, "What in your area? You've been making wine for years. What in your area is exciting? What cultivars do you have?" And it is the weirdest thing. Columbar came up, and I said, "Do you have old-time Columbar?" And they said, "Yes." And I said, "I would love to see that, please." And I went to the vineyard, and it was the most craziest vineyard I've ever seen. It looks like table grapes almost, and it's just sand. It's just plain sand. And they do flat irrigation 3 or 4 times, where they just open a thing, and then this vineyard gets flood. And then as you stand there, you're about ankle deep in the water, and then 10 minutes later, there's no water. And they've actually dug with a digger to show me how deep the roots are going down. And then I went back and I tasted when there was grapes, and I said, I have to make something of this. But I'm going to be the only one in South Africa drinking Columbar, and I can't take too much, and I only took a little bit. And I tasted the grapes, and I knew this is something special, but I also thought, if I put Columbar on the bottle, nobody's going to buy this. And I thought, I have to make a story about this thing. And I went reading about this, and I realized that Columbar was actually the first white grape planted in South Africa, and with Chenin Blanc. And I thought, 360 years we've got this, but it was abused. And suddenly I found this vineyard that just showcases this phenomenal grapes. And I thought, okay, it's from Vredendal to Stellenbosch, so I'm going to give this Langpad, the name Langpad. And it's interesting because people would, now I've done the second vintage, people would phone us and say, "Do you still have some of that Langpad?" And I would go, "The Columbar." And they go, "Yeah, the Langpad." And then perfect thing I have to say, and I'm really glad Lisa is saying, I don't think Lisa also wants to use the word Columbar. She talks about the Smurf wine. So it depends between Smurf wine and Columbar. And I can't tell you how excited I am about Columbar. And then my biggest dream is, and I think it's going to get realistic, is in 10 years' time, we're going to have many, many Columbars. It's like Chenin Blanc, because it's been there, not treated with respect. And the beautiful thing was last year when we launched the first one, the 2020. Some of those wines went to England and ended up in a decanter tasting, and was voted last year as one of the top 50 most exciting wines in the world, white wines in the world. And I was overjoyed because I thought a Columbar from South Africa. And another thing that I want to say about that is I'm trying to think, what can we do more in South Africa than Chenin Blanc and Sauvignon Blanc and Chardonnay and Cabernet and all these things. And I actually started looking. I've got a really good friend who's a winemaker or owns a winery on Santorini, and he keeps sending me a Certico, yeah. And I love this grape, and I thought we should plant this in South Africa. And what was brilliant, I did a tasting a while back for Lisa and a group, and really phenomenal wine group. And they tasted this Columbar. They've never tasted a Columbar before, and they said it's the closest thing that they think would be at a top end a Certico from Greece. And I thought, I can die a happy person. I've done my job. I think South Africa are the only country in the world that really produces Columbar in this amount. The only other people are Bordeaux, and they do cognac of that. And I just think it's old, but it's new, and it's something so fresh. It's literally from on the west coast, from the beach, about 15 kilometers, and it's so beautiful because every night that cold mist comes in over this vineyard like a blanket. And then literally a couple of minutes later, as the sun comes up, and I think it hits 8 o'clock, it's 40 already, and it burns away this mist, and that saltiness stays behind in the vineyard, and you can taste it because it's got that sea kelp salinity, freshness, but with a lot of body under that. So I'm hoping, Dan, I've changed you from a grandma's drink to a very hip drink, new one.
Look, I speak in great jest because I've not only thoroughly enjoy this, but I love the analysis, the analogy with Colombard. I see Daryl Balfour. Colombard is such an exciting wine right now, and the Larpad so reminiscent of Assyrtiko. Daryl also says I have 4 or 5 local Colombards in my cellar right now. That doesn't count, Daryl. You have every single wine ever made in South Africa, ever. I'll just ignore that. But on the Assyrtiko line, I see Elisa. Ian's Colombard is South Africa's Assyrtiko. It tastes just like the best Assyrtiko out of Santorini. Lisa, Daryl, if you get the chance, vineyard called Moraiti, a little winery called Moraitis in the island of Paros. One of the best examples of Greek Assyrtiko that I've had, and it was lovely. We've still got your Cinsault to try, Ian, but I want to jump back to Backsberg, a place where I have such wonderful memories. And I go back to 2011, and I've got this here, the Pump House Shiraz. Now, this was one of the 3 bottles of wine, or the 3 wines that were at the wedding. One of them was a Sauvignon Blanc, and that came from Miraval, because Martin van Buningen at Miraval is pretty much my other dad, and Mark, his son, one of my 2 dearest friends. And I had that one in, but the other ones were from Backsberg, and I think we almost bankrupted you, Simon. In fact, that might be why you had to do a deal with DGB, because I think there was a deal with the Rotary Club where I hosted a charity event, and in return, you supplied the wine for my wedding, not realizing it was a Greek wine, and we had 320 people come to it. So I apologize. We almost closed down the business, but gee, it was a great night out, and I loved it. And I love this one, as I always have it. It sits for me with a number of your wines, whereby when I bring them out, it's very hard to find people who don't enjoy them, whether it's this, whether it's the Klein Babylon's Turin, which we also had at the wedding. Wines are just generally, and without trying to play down their attributes, say that they're bland and they appeal to everyone, because that's not what I'm trying to say. I just find that with so much of your wine, you tend to hit the mark with rather a lot of people. You just consistently do something right with your wine.
Yeah, I think, the philosophy we've always had is like to aim for what my dad says, a high degree of drinkability. So, like this wine must be something that you can go beyond just one glass. Like you must be able to, finish the bottle. And, and the way we've done that is to just try and make wines that are balanced and kind of similar to Ian, that go with, food as well. Like the acid shouldn't stand out. It shouldn't be over oak. There should be just enough fruit. There must be structure, but not too much. And we've tried to sort of keep very consistent with that. And yeah, I think for the most part it's worked, and we've managed to build a real support for the wines around that philosophy. And with the Klein Babylon Turin, which is a Bordeaux blend, really almost always 50% Merlot, 50% Cab, and then the Pump House Shiraz, which is a straight Shiraz, which 1 or 2 vintages we dabbled with a little bit of Viognier, but we kind of if anyone's worked with Viognier, it can be kind of like rocket fuel a little bit. But yeah, the wines have always, we've tried to keep them sort of consistent, and that's worked for us.
Not surprisingly, Daryl Balfour drinks your wine, because Daryl Balfour drinks everything. He's like a secret Russian gazillionaire with the amount of wine he somehow gets hold of. I have great memories of Backsberg back when I was starting my wine exploration journey back in the early 70s. The dry red was one I recall. That was always, I remember that early when I first started coming out to Backsberg, post-university on a journalist's salary, and the dry red was always excellent value. And I think that extends across the board. In fact, sometimes I've had a look at the prices on your wine, and I bought them hurriedly before you've realized the mistake and charged me what you should have done. But it has been an approach, not just wine that's drinkable, but wine that can fit the pocket of a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, we've always tried to kind of over deliver on the price point. Whether it was sort of our sort of very sort of price friendly dry red, which as Daryl points out, like that was for a lot of people has been the stepping stone into wine in general. And then an introduction to the Backsberg range. But then we're also selling a white blend and a red blend at $250 and $300 a bottle, but also believe that that offers great value as well. So it's to offer people this kind of stepping stones to explore different wines at different price points, but we've always tried to kind of over deliver on the quality, and that's meant people coming back for more,
as they have done consistently. And as I've got no doubt they will continue to do, the changes to the nature of Backsberg behind the scenes notwithstanding. Before we wrap up with a quick taste of Cinsault with Mr. Naude, 5 years' time, you're sitting with me in conversation once we finish talking about Israeli wine adventures with Ian, and we're updating. It's 2026. Where is Backsberg? What's happened in those 5 years? What's your vision for what this project that's so close to your heart has on its horizon?
Yeah, I think for me, we've always been very strong in the local market, but I think the big opportunity is to build premium brands in export markets, and that's exciting. That's where I think the kind of real opportunity is for South African wines. I think we've done it in small pockets. Ian alludes to some of the kind of top end in the UK, which has been very well received. But I think for instance, the US has been very close to my heart, and I think there's a huge opportunity for South African wine there. So I think to expand and to grow the export markets and to really pound the pavement for South African wine, abroad. I think for me, like if we can crack that for Backsberg and for South Africa, that would be my objective.
I wouldn't bet against you with the combined force of the team, Tim and Andrew Harris and the rest of the crew at DGB. It's a really exciting space, Simon, and I'll be watching it closely, hopefully from Backsberg itself. I'd love to see those Spitbriars get back up and running. And here's a pledge from me to you before we go back to Ian. If you get the InterVarsity Wine Challenge up and running, count Dan Really Likes Wine in as a very excited media partner, and we'll get UCT putting those Marties back in their place and get the Cape Premier University to the forefront of wine tasting. Before we say goodbye to you both, just a quick word. The last, we don't have much time left there, Ian, but just in a minute or two, you spoke about Cinsault maybe not being quite as trendy, much like Colombard is, but I sense it's a slightly different perception where people kind of go, "Oh, I'm not drinking Colombard." With Cinsault, it's like, hang on, Cinsault, I'd forgotten about that. But Cinsault's had this wonderful revival, and we're seeing it both with cabs in blends as we did in the 70s, but also on its own. Give us the quick rundown on your Cinsault and why it gets the Ian Naude pulse racing.
Cinsault for me is also one of those grape varieties. It was the first planted grape in South Africa, and I had the privilege to taste a couple of with a friend of mine who had wines from 1950s, 60s, 70s, 80s. And I stood there and I was stunned. I couldn't believe this. Even though it said mostly on the label, it said Cabernet Stellenbosch. We knew it was Cinsault. And I thought, I have to do this again. And then I found this block. And this block is in 1978, and it's Darling. And it's a single vineyard. And when I tasted this grapes, I was blown away. And I just stood there and I thought, I have to make this wine. Even if I'm the only person who's going to drink it, I'll find somebody else. And it took me back almost to that southern France, where you would sit on the beach, chill your red wine, and have this phenomenal lighter style, but not inferior wine. And for me, it was one of the biggest things I've done was we took that leap of faith and make a Cinsault. And I actually, this year, I started, this is my fourth one, and we've just released 2016. And I thought I also want to give this a name. I want to start giving these vineyards their right area, their right thing, and we call it Werfdans. Because in Darling, we get these little whirlwinds on the fields when the wheat is cut and it's just dry and it's dusty, and you get these little whirlwinds. And the Cape Coloureds has got this beautiful name. They call it Stofduivels of Werfdans. And I thought this is the perfect way, because when I drink this wine and I've chilled it a little bit and I open this up, I get that whirlwind on my tongue, that Turkish delight rose petal. And what's beautiful is, I think we've come a long way in the last 4 or 5 years. If you put this in blind tastings with your top Chateauneuf de Papes it stands up, it mans up. And I think South Africa, 360 years later, at least we start putting this back on the map.
And not before time. You're nailing Cinso, you're nailing Colombard. I don't think there's anything you couldn't make us enjoy, Ian, and more power to you for doing that. Thank you for tasting some of the new wine. Again, I apologize for drinking it 75 years before I should, but I hope my great-grandchildren will enjoy the rest of what's left that I haven't caravaned. But more importantly, it's lovely hanging out with you. Simon, lovely hanging out with you too, and reliving some great memories. It's an important month, November, for the Nicol family, and a couple of weeks' time, Dimitri and I'll be celebrating that decade and doing so with some more Backsberg, as I am doing now. Good luck to you in the future. It's an exciting time, and I think you guys have got a great partnership there, and it bodes well for both you and for South African wine. So I think it's a terrific story. And Ian, who knows what you're doing next? It's probably a grape we've never heard of, and you're growing it in a cave somewhere and turning it into a 7-star platter wine. Whatever it is, we'll be drinking it happily. Guys, to both of you, thank you so much. Absolute pleasure.
Thanks,
and here's to being with both of you and sitting around a large magnum and sharing stories of Israeli misadventures and the joy of wine.
Excellent.
We'd
Thanks a
love
lot.
to. Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Dan.
Bye-bye.
Yes.
There we go.
Thanks,
Ian Naude from his eponymous Ian Naude label, and Simon Back from Backsberg. Gee, they've got a lot of change happening there, but I think it's very positive change. And I think that combination with the DGB team are doing all sorts in wine at the moment is going to be one to watch very excitedly. So that is us for today. Where are we? It's Thursday, right? So a couple of things to look out for. Monday, I'm catching up with Bruno from Latour, along with Hannes from Storm and the great Michael Fridjon, and we're going to be talking about barrels and Burgundy and South African versions thereof, and some wine discussion that pits France and South Africa together. So looking forward to that. A little later on tonight, it's not quite wine, but it's over a bottle of wine. That'll be over on the Dan Nicol platforms rather than the Dan Really Likes Wine platforms. We'll be chatting to Maps Maponyane as we kick off a brand new series on entrepreneurship with Bosch & Dahl's The Nicholas. That'll be online, and of course the Dan Nicol Show a little later on this evening. Look out for Alan Committee and a rather surprising twist at the end of tonight's show. Thanks to everybody who watched. Daryl and Lisa all sending through great information. Helen Leburn-Buerta, thank you. She says, well, thank you for watching, Helen. I will see you all on Monday evening as we talk South Africa, we talk France, but most importantly, we talk wine. Goodbye. To join the Pick and Pay Wine Club, simply SMS your smart shopper number to 36775. It's absolutely free, and you'll get for yourself 3 times the smart shopper points on every bottle of wine bought. You'll also get a 20% discount on 10 different wines each month, a 25% discount on a case of wine, and a Magnum, some terrific competitions and invitations to awesome events.